This podcast is brought to you by Enlightening Learners Academic Coaching and Tutoring Services. In this presentation, we're going to learn to solve quadratic equations by completing the square. So essentially, when we're talking about solving the quadratic equations, we're talking about solving the root. Now, what we've typically done is we've completed the diamond on this one. So let's do the diamond real quick and explain why this doesn't work. So I complete my diamond, and a times c is a negative 13, my b is a positive 12. What number times itself gets me to 13, and added gets me a negative 13. So we've got a 13 and a 1. This becomes a plus and this becomes a negative. Alright, so this will actually work. X plus 13 and x minus 1. And we set both of these equal to 0. X equals negative 13 and x equals positive 1. And the way we do that is by subtracting 13 from both sides of the equal sign and set them equal to 0. So this works. So now there's another way to do this, and we're going to do this by completing a square. So what we're going to do is we're going to move the negative 13 to the other side. So I'm going to add 13 to both sides, and I'm left with x squared plus 12x equals 0. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take half of this b term. I'm going to take this b term and I'm going to take half of it. And then I'm going to square that. So 12 divided by 2 is 6, and when I square that, I'm going to get 36. And what happens is I'm going to do that to both sides. So x squared plus 12x, and I'm adding a 36 equals 13 plus 36. So I've added 36 to both sides, so technically I haven't changed the problem. I can do whatever I want to an equation as long as I do it to both sides. Fantastic. So I've done that. Now what we have here is a difference of two squares, or excuse me, we have perfect squares. We've got a 1 and we've got a 36, and this can be broken down into x plus 6 quantity squared equals 36 plus 13 equals 49. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the square root of both of these. And I'm left, that frees my x plus 6, because those cross out. I'm left with x plus 6 is equal to the square root plus or minus the square root of 49. Well, the square root of 49 is 7. So we're left with x plus 6 equals plus and minus 7. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to subtract 6 from both sides to get x by itself. And what we're left with is x equals plus or minus 7 minus 6. And so we're going to take this and we're going to say x plus 7 minus 6. X is equal to plus 7 minus 6, and x is equal to minus 7 minus 6. Well, look, 7 minus 6 is a 1, and negative 7 minus 6 is a negative 13. And it's the same value that we came when we did the diamond method. So oftentimes you're going to have a quadratic equation that does not work with the diamond method. and in which case you'll have to use this format. So if we use a diamond to try to complete this, what we find is that there's a -6 on the top because 1 times -6, -6, and -2 on the bottom. There are no combinations that will get us a multiple of -3 and a sum of -2. So this doesn't work. But finding the square will. So what we're going to do is we're going to add 6 to both sides. And we're left with m squared minus 2m equals 6. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take half of -2 divided by 2, and we're going to square that. Well, -1 squared is a 1, so we're going to take m squared minus 2m plus 1 and we're going to add it to the 6 plus 1. Now remember that when I'm dealing with equations, as long as I do the same thing to both sides, I'm good. So what happens is this is a perfect square, becomes m minus 1 quantity squared, and it's equal to 7. Now what we do is find the square root of both of these, and the square root of that cancels out the square of that. I'm left with m minus 1 is equal to the square root of 7. Remember that when we're dealing with square roots, it's positive and negative. We want to add 1 to both sides. And so what I'm left with is m is equal to the square root of 7 plus or minus plus 1. Now you can use your calculator to find the square root of 7, and then you add that value and subtract that value to a 1 to get your two answers. You can just leave this as your answer, or you can use your calculator to calculate the square root of 7, which I believe is 2.6. Then you add that to 1 to get 3.6, or subtract it to get 1.6.
Okay, so I've identified some steps for you to follow. The first step is to move your C from the original place into the C that's next to 0. And you do that by using the additive property as demonstrated here. I've added 6 to both sides to remove that C from that position, and what I'm left with is a binomial. So the next step is to find a value, half the value of b, and we find that value by dividing b by 2, and then once we do that, we square it, and -1 squared is equal to 1 in this case. So we find out half of b, square it, and then add it to both sides. So what we want to do is we want to add that 1 that we found here, we want to add it to the left side and the right side. Remember that we can do that so long as we do it to both sides, what we've done here. Now what we have left is a perfect square on the left side. The perfect square is m minus 1 quantity squared, and it equals 7. Now what we want to do is we want to find the square root of both sides. Again, I can, as long as I do the same thing to both sides, I'm okay. So I'm going to find the square root of the left side and the square root of the right side. And what that does is this square root function cancels out this square. And that's what I want, because I'm left with m minus 1 equals the square root of 7. Now remember, when you're dealing with square roots, that it's both a positive and a negative value. Alright, so we use the additive property. We're going to use the additive property to get m by itself, and that's our simplification step. and we're left with m equals plus or minus the square root of 7 plus 1. If we wanted to calculate the square root of 7, we'd use our calculator to do that, and I believe the square root of 7 is 2.6 something, 2.86 I believe. So anyway, you enter that in your calculator, you add the positive value of square root of 7 to 1, and you would find the negative value of 7 to 1, and that would be your two answers.